presentation. So we have asked if it could be recorded and we could take photographs as well. So if everybody's all right with that, I shall hand you over to Rekha, and thank you very much for attending.
Great, thank you all. Thank you, Tim.
So, right. Yep.
Can you hear me all right, everyone? Thank you. I've just started the recording, and that's all okay with everyone, I take it. Thank you. I'll start with a little bit about myself, and then I've got a presentation to share, and I think that might put things in context a little bit more. So my name's Rekha, and talking about death and dying and bereavement is one of my favorite subjects. That just tells you that I don't get invited to a lot of social gatherings, but that's just how the cookie crumbles. I am a nurse by training, but I came into nursing as a second career. I used to work in the corporate sector before this, and then my husband got diagnosed with a brain tumor, and the care he received wasn't really person-centered at all. And I felt that he had become a number. He was another sort of number taking up a bed rather than the individual, the person behind his condition or his illness. So here I was with two young children at the time, and I thought to myself, if someone's got to change it, I have that accountability to everyone else who probably has suffered like I have, but doesn't quite know how to articulate their suffering. So I went back to university, retrained as a nurse. I went to King's, and then as a specialist public health nurse, further training, and then a master's, so further training in palliative science. And I've worked as a nurse essentially all over London. But my special interest and my main academic interest, as well as my main professional interest, is working with communities that are marginalized or minoritized, because I think we, and I like to put myself in that category too for various reasons, but because I think our needs are slightly more nuanced than that, if you like, of the general population. So that's roughly what I do. I have been at Marie Curie for a bit now. I'm the deputy head for quality and clinical governance. And before Marie Curie, I led the 0 to 19 service, it is called, during the Grenfell fire disaster. So quite a lot of experience, both lived and professional, of working with loss, working with death and dying. So is everyone still with me? Have I not bored the socks off everyone still? Good. That's good to know. Right. So now I'm going to share my presentation. If I share the presentation, I can't see anyone. So my request is, if you have questions, just hang on to them. It's not an awfully long presentation, and I promise you it won't be death by PowerPoint. So hold on to your questions and I'll come to question time. All I need is someone to shout out if they can actually see the presentation. Right, can you all see the presentation?
Yes.
Fabulous, thank you. Right, so I've told, yeah, so this is who I am, and we're going to talk about death and dying. Today we will talk first about a little bit about why talking about death is important. What to expect in the last few weeks and months of life, and who we are as Marie Curie and what we do. So some statistics now. Um, 16 million people in the UK are considered to be disabled. I don't like that term personally, but these are, I, I would more like to think of us as differently abled, but we are certainly a marginalized group. It costs an average of £975 a month to live, just an extra on top of someone who does not share disabilities or who is not marginalized for whatever reason or minoritized. We are more than twice as likely to be unemployed, and those statistics are really sad. We are more than 6 percentage points likely to be in poverty, and the likelihood of us being in poverty towards the end of life increases even more, by to about 23% more compared to the average population. So that's why I think it's good to think about death. Now, I was looking at research, including research I have done about why it is good to talk about death. And I quite like this quote, and I'm not sure who it is from, but I've always found that quite useful. It says, to the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure. And therefore, to me, planning for that becomes important. Now, what do I mean by planning? I mean two things essentially. One is we have enough evidence in literature that corroborates or that agrees with the fact that when we express our concerns, when we talk about our fears, we actually reduce anxiety and stress, particularly in palliative care, which is essentially the care at the end of life. And two, getting to befriend our illness, I like to call it, or getting to know our illness. And some of us may not have an illness. We may just be getting more senior in life. So getting to know our frailty, in other words, is very important, because then we know what to expect as that frailty increases. And when we know that, we can plan for the future. I'll leave that slide for a few more seconds just for it to sink in, because it's quite an important slide. Okay, so really then, the at the heart of it is this question as we think about our mortality. What is it that is most important to me? Most important to me now? And what will be more important, and there might be a few things like that, as my frailty increases, that is in the future. So what matters to me now, and what are the sort of things that are important for me as frailty increases in the future? It's a very important question, really. And it's important that we ask it, and that we are not not trying to postpone the question for a later day. In my clinical practice, I've unfortunately seen far too many of us who've postponed this question for a later day, thinking that frailty death happens to someone else, it's not me just now. I assure you that is not the case. So important to think about these questions. And just before the start of the presentation, I was mentioning to Tim, I'm very happy to come back and break this question down further and engage in conversations with you all just to get you thinking about it. But again, it's quite an important question to think about. So then clinically, what are the sort of things that happen to almost all of us in the last few months? I've said weeks, but this is really what the trajectory looks like in the last few months or up to a year in the last year of life. What are the sort of physiological things we can expect? We can expect weight changes. It's usually a drop in the weight, and that is for a number of reasons. As our frailty increases, or if we have a disease, as the disease progresses, appetite usually falls. Sometimes there are additional problems for example, there are tumors that can affect how much we can eat and how much we can swallow and how much we can retain. So that causes a change in weight. Sometimes, for example, with patients with heart failure, it's the other way around, where actually there is an increase in the weight, but that's not weight which is being added, it's more fluid which is building up. So weight changes are very common. There is also, as the body gets weaker, its tendency is to sleep more. Fatigue is usually very common in the last year of life. Sickness and or nausea, I have said, because that's sickness sometimes doesn't have a nausea element, sometimes does have a nausea element. It depends upon the condition that we have and how we are being treated. Do remember, all medications have their side effects, and sickness and nausea are a common side effect of most of our medications. Breathlessness, partly linked to fatigue, partly linked to our condition, partly also sometimes linked to some medication, not a lot though, largely related to fatigue and to our condition. Constipation, quite a common condition, more common than we think it is, partly linked to anxiety, partly linked to poor appetite, poor eating, poor mobility, because we're not getting up and about as much because of fatigue, therefore the tendency to get constipated. And the one we fear most, pain. And actually, that is the one for which we have the best tools to hand to manage. And I'll come to that next. Is everyone still with me? Because I can't see anyone. If someone could shout out, yep, fabulous, thank you. So what could be the practical tips then? How do we manage? So for example, with appetite, it's a good idea to eat smaller portions, to but smaller and often, so little and often. Drink smaller sips, certainly if in some way our swallow is compromised. um, Eat softer foods and as much as tolerated, and try and eat calorie rich foods like ice cream and yogurt, etc. So this is a good way to navigate around increasing frailty in the last year of life. Sometimes the GP can prescribe us nutritional drinks, etc. The verdict on how they taste like and how much of it is palatable is out there. I personally think they're too sweet, but then there's a lot of product. There's a big product range, and most people are able to swallow and to absorb them quite well. As far as mobility is concerned, it's very important that we have things easily accessible around our bedside, that our room temperature is ambient. And this is particularly important, the last one, that we avoid overcrowding either with people or with things or furniture, so on and so forth. Too much noise and bright lights. There is some evidence to show that this sort of overstimulation increases our fatigue. Um, it's not uncommon as we eat less, drink less, to have a dry mouth, also caused by medication partially. So it's good to have sort of ice chips and ice lollies, even if we are sucking on them like often. That's a good idea. And like I say, smaller sips. For breathlessness, a very good exercise is they say if we can have relaxing music, mindfulness, for example, things like that, just to sort of calm our brain activity down. Um, the use of room fan is very helpful. Flannels, often changing position. Now, all these can be supported by, we've got medication that can support with breathlessness as well. Um, with constipation, very good idea if we are not very mobile because of our condition or because of fatigue, then to start to be on regular laxatives. I'm mindful we're not eating a lot, so just sort of stool softeners are enough to manage constipation. And with pain, like I say, we've got an arsenal full of tools to manage pain relief medications. I suppose the most important takeaway message for me, for all of you today, is pain relief medication, especially morphine, does not expedite death. There is a lot of, so in all my work with certainly some minority ethnic communities, there's a lot of myth about morphine expediting death. Morphine does nothing of that sort. Also, because we use it in very small tapered quantities, it has been traditionally proven over the years of its use to be a very effective analgesic for pain relief. Can also support with breathlessness. So something not to be frightened of. And then I'll talk a little bit about Marie Curie, who we are, what we do. So Marie Curie is a national charity. We are funded by the NHS, but only a certain percentage. From memory, I think it's anywhere between 15 to 30%, depending upon which UK nation you are, that our activities are funded by the NHS. The rest of it all comes through fundraising and people leaving us their legacies in their wills. We are certainly the biggest charity funder for end of life research in this country. We have 11 hospices across the UK that offer specialist inpatient unit palliative care for complex palliative symptom management. That is for those patients who've got a number of things going on with them and we can't really manage it in the community or in their homes. So all these people, and it's all free of cost, are managed in the hospice and then are sent back home. Again, another myth that you come to hospice to die. About half of our patients are actually sent back home. So that's something worth thinking about. We are very good at managing symptoms in the hospice, complex symptoms, and then we are happy to send people back home where, again, our services support them. We have, and I thought this was really important for your community, we have a companion service that offer befriending home, and they offer that through both face-to-face contacts, but now increasingly so of virtual contacts. So that might be something that's useful for you all. We've got hospice at home teams, which provide hospice care at home. Again, we've got rapid response teams that provide specialist palliative care in the community. I'm told that if you're registered with a GP, because I checked with them, if you're registered with a GP, they will come out to boaters as well. So these services are for all of us as well, as long as we're registered with the local GP. Right. Moving ahead then, I've listed some important contacts because I think, in my experience, this is what I normally get asked for on the ward or in the community by my patients. You may already have these contacts. I will send this presentation over to Tim and Tracy, so the list is there if you want them. But there is a Marie Curie helpline, which the number is below every slide I have used. It's a free helpline. It's for anybody who has questions about their condition, as long as they have some sort of a diagnosis. So it's a free helpline. We are open Monday to Saturday from 8 to 6. And that brings me nicely to the end of my presentation, and I'm open to questions. So if that's okay, what I'll do is I'll stop sharing so I can see you all. Great. I can see you all. Was that useful?
Yes, thank you. Right, so has anyone got any questions they'd like to ask? All speak at once.
I have a question.
Yeah.
We talked today, some of the barriers, particularly for people who live on boats, is they have difficulty accessing health services, particularly if they don't have an address. Are there similar barriers to accessing sort of support that Marie Curie offer? People, if you're living on a boat and haven't got an address, how would you access support?
That's a very good question. So we are trying to build our services to suit everybody. And what that means is, as long as you are registered with a GP, unfortunately, that seems to not budge, that difficulty. We can get you, so if you had complex symptoms, we can get you and we can arrange to bring you to us to be looked after in the IPU, in our inpatient units, or our community teams can come out to your boats and to support you. So the sort of support that is offered is either we'll get a healthcare assistant to come out to you. They can do medications as well to support you during night times, or it'll be the rapid response service, depending upon, of course, which part of the country you are, who can go out to you. And these are nurses and a healthcare assistants. So if there was a complex issue you were facing that couldn't be resolved quickly, we'd get the rapid response service out. The only proviso is the registration with the GP. And I know that because you're a mobile population, that is a barrier to you. Unfortunately, so far, we've not been able to somehow successfully work our way around it. The only other way around it is if you had a hospital admission, say, for example, with your condition, and the hospital then referred you to us, then we don't need a GP. Basically, we need someone to refer into our service. You can self-refer yourself also to our services now, because we're trying to reach out to more people. So you can self-refer yourself, but of course you'd need all your all your medical papers, etc. So, and maybe a list of who you're, not all the consultant, but who the immediate treating consultant is, so we can liaise and see how, just carry that work forward, and in a more palliative context. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, yes.
Richard. Yeah, I love your way of describing death as the next great adventure. As a Christian, that's how I view it as well. But the other thing is, my wife and I have both, and my mother-in-law did as well, we planned our funerals so that it made it a lot easier for the next of kin to carry on to do the funeral. Do you sort of advise that sort of thing as well?
Yes, so we at Marie Curie, we've got our free will writing, and we can advise you with funeral planning as well. I would highly encourage all that. All this is a form of planning for when it's our time to go on that great adventure. Something else I would like all of you to consider, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's something called care planning, and basically it's you advocating for yourself, your wishes on what is most important to you, and how and where you would like to be cared for as your frailty and increases, and as you approach the last few months and weeks of life. Now, in London, it is being rolled out across all GP surgeries as mandatory. I'm not sure what the situation is. From what I'm given to understand and my experience of it, it's quite patchy. But nevertheless, you can ask your GP to make it to make an appointment to do what is called an advanced care plan or a respect form. Or we've got a Marie Curie advanced care planning service, again, which is free of cost, which can be accessed as long as you have some diagnosis. It could be heart failure, it could be cancer, it could just be a stroke, it could be anything that we consider that is considered a serious and chronic illness, i.e. you've had it for more than 2 years. Then these, there's all these services that are free. Is that answering your question?
Thank you, yes.
And I'm very happy to send out to Tim and Tracy the numbers of that advanced care planning team as well. If you want me to come back and talk about advanced care planning in detail, what it entails, what the form looks like, etc., I'm happy to do that too.
Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Rekha. And yeah, I think just for everybody's reference, we can put all of that on our website for future reference as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And you can call the Marie Curie info line. They will, they'll be as good as me signposting you to the right service. But if you wanted someone to handhold you through it, I'm very happy to come back.
Yeah. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Joseph.
I was going to say on this topic, there's a really great podcast from the British Medical Journal from, I think, 2016 called Dying on the Canal, that features a lady who was receiving palliative care while living on Narrowboat. And it's quite sort of inspiring and interesting. So, we've been listening further on.
I'm sorry, I haven't caught all of that. Tim, can you please repeat it for me?
So he was referring to was it a podcast?
A podcast called Dying on the Canal.
Podcast called Dying on the Canals from
British Medical Journal.
British Medical Journal from a few years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll forward you a link to it.
Yes, I'd be very interested in that. And having worked with someone who lived in a boat, I'm going back a few years, and supporting them through their death, through their final palliative process, I can assure you it's quite nuanced and complicated. Especially really the difficulty that I faced was because there was, they weren't registered to a GP, so we needed to get them into hospital and then provide the immediate care that was required and get the hospital then to refer to us. And we had this patient in the IPU. And I'm very pleased to say that we were able to discharge this patient. Of course, this was a London patient. We were able to discharge them, and I haven't heard anything from them. So this was about 3 or 4 years ago. So yes, it is nuanced, but I'd like to leave you with some hope that we are here, and we are here. We will work around your needs as best as we can within our regulatory framework to support you.
Thank you. I think our time's pretty much up, so unless anybody else has got a question.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Rekha. That's really good. I mean, I hope everybody agrees with me that it seems like a really morbid, horrible topic, but I think Rekha covers it very sensitively and very nicely. And it is something that we all have to face, don't we? You know, it doesn't matter how poorly we are or how well we are. It's the one and only absolute fact of life is that we will all die, and we will all be facing this. So I think thank you, Rekha, for for tackling such a difficult subject and giving us something to think about.
Well,
So,
thank
yeah.
you for having me. I mean, I'm really grateful, and this is my favorite topic, so I don't get invited to a lot of coffee mornings. But thank you all. Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
I'll stop record.